Hi, my name's Cy Horton and I'm a sales engineer for FARO UK. To cover the Scene 7 new features, I've split these tutorials down into 3 parts. Firstly, we'll look at some of the basics at a glance. So we've now given you the ability to control the scanner interface directly within Scene. And also we've included a new on-site registration functionality, which I will cover in another tutorial. With regards to WebShare, we've streamlined the connectivity between Scene and WebShare, where we can now send scans, clusters, or selections, or project point clouds directly to WebShare using the new Cloud Point Exchange format. Again, I've split this out into another tutorial so we can go through that in more detail. Meshing has been improved to include refinement of borders and holes. We've also given you the ability to create your own overview map with an X-ray style on individual scans or groups of scans. With regards to the interface, we've updated the ribbon functionality so we can toggle between color grayscale, or we can use the new poly edge function. We can select targets and planes in the new interface. We can apply a grid tool in the new interface, and we've just generally updated the navigation toolbar. With regards to apps, we've done some modifications and improvements to the orthophoto app, and we've also included the Forensic Wizard app into the application menu. From a licensing perspective, we can now transfer the license to another machine, and from a processing perspective, we've improved the edge artifact and point cloud filters, and we've made some additional updates to the settings. So firstly, we'll look at some of the meshing enhancements. So in the dialog box, you'll notice we've got a new meshing mode that enables us to modify what we do to a non-watertight mesh. We've also got a new section that applies to smoothing of that mesh geometry. Within the meshing mode, we can change the slider bar to give us the data we want. So in the top left hand corner, you can see the point cloud. If we were to choose the watertight option, then that will literally enclose all the mesh to give us a watertight mesh for 3D printing. Now in certain instances, it depends how much you've scanned as to how well that watertight mesh will work. Alternatively, down in the bottom left hand corner, if we're using the slider bar set to position 50, then it will start to improve the edges and the gaps and the holes, but we still have holes within the mesh data. If we move that slider bar to number 66, which is the default setting, then you'll see it's filled in some of those holes already. But there might be areas that are just too large for us to fill in automatically, and we might need to do that in alternative software. From a smoothing perspective, you can see on the left, if we've not smoothed the point cloud, it can be quite jaggedy depending on the amount of points we've captured and the triangulation value that we've used. Again, this could come down to the fact we've got poor point cloud or we've got fine detail that we need to maintain. So when using the slider bar, you need to be considerate to the data, otherwise you may lose detail. But as you can see on the right, by smoothing it out, it's given us a cleaner mesh. We then move over to the overview map. So with the overview map, it's part of the on-site registration workflow, which I've mentioned I will cover in another tutorial. But it can be created manually on the Explore tab. So if you look top left hand side of the Explore tab, you'll see the overview map, under which you can create it manually. Once you've done this, you can export that on a project, a cluster, or a single scan to a TIFF or a DXF file, which in this instance we've brought into AutoCAD to show you how we can then utilize that data. So looking in a little bit more detail, the overview maps can be created for each individual scan, or because they're linked to the scans, the overview map will dynamically update as we move scans around between clusters. But it's a great addition to create quick floor plans, where as you've seen, these can be taken into CAD. They could be placed on a drawing sheet to save time modelling up. Looking at some of the updated functionality for the ribbon, then what we've done here is we've given you an instant toggle switch between colour and grayscale when working in a planar or a quick view. Previously, you'd had to delete the scan point cloud through the new interface, but now you can just do it on the fly, and it often improves target selection where you haven't got the degradation of light. So on that toolbar now, we've unified it and given you all the features that you need to in order to toggle it on and off, amongst a few others. From a ribbon perspective, we've now given the ability to mark spheres, checkerboards, planes and points under the Explore tab, and we also can use the poly edge point. So if we've selected an area of a wall there, what the system will do is will recognise when we've got a change in direction, and it will give us a nice smooth plane based on that area. We've then also added in the grid tool, so we can create polar or rectangular grids on a flat surface or an angular surface to give us some proportion of scale or to allow us to work within that point cloud more effectively. We move over to the filters, so when we're processing the data, when we first imported it into Scene, we've got a completely new edge artifact filter. So on the left here you can see we've got quite a lot of edge flare on the flag, but as we process the data in Scene 7, you can see the majority of that data has disappeared to give us more quality data. Here it becomes more apparent, especially when you're looking at the handrail or the balustrading around the front of this balcony. This is what it would look like in Scene 6.2. But in Scene 7, after we've applied that filter, you can see the cleanliness of the data. We've also done a lot of work to the project point cloud filters for color balancing. So in an instance like this, where we've got light and shade and different variants, in 6.2, this is what we'd expect from a project point cloud. But once we've applied the new features in 7, you can see a lot of that transition in the color has smoothed out. Another example here on the floor, where you see the overlap of different exposures from the camera. But in Scene 7, we've smoothed all that out to give us a better looking point cloud. And also we've improved the data quality, especially when aligned to the new S-Series scanner, the S150, the S350 and the M70. So this is how the data would look in 6.2, but it's a lot cleaner and a lot crisper in Scene 7. We then look at some of the apps. So first off, we've made some modifications to the orthophoto. So if you're a regular user of the orthophoto, you'll notice some modifications to the dialog box, where it allows us to export the data as a DXF to bring into multiple CAD systems. But we can also define the projection plane position. So rather than having to rotate the image so that the projected image is on the back face of a clipping box, we can pick a specific point for that ortho image to be generated on. And down at the bottom we can choose whether we want to export to 2D or 3D DXF with all the images or just one DXF per image. So the orthophoto itself, you can use one or multiple clipping boxes to create your scaled images. But we can also now, we're not limited to TIFF images. We can also export as a PNG, a JPEG and a BMP. And that data in turn can be brought into your CAD system and can be brought into the exact point cloud coordinate system to enable you to draft over the top of it. A few updates on the VR View app. So we have the new plugin for watching VR scans for all customers. So if you've created a VR environment in Scene and you're passing that data to somebody else with Scene and they've got an Oculus Rift, then they can use that data and view that data within Scene itself. But the plugin does not replace the VR generator and has different functionality. So the VR generator is a chargeable solution, so please speak to your local account manager or go onto the App Store for FARO, and this allows you to export a virtual environment where somebody without a Scene license but with an Oculus Rift can actually view the information on their own. A few other improvements that we've made along the way. The first improvement is with regards to speed. So when loading scans, we've improved that by a factor of 1.5. Also when colorizing scans, we've improved that by a factor of 3. When creating project point cloud data, we've improved that by a factor of 1.5. And if we're working on a project with roughly 25 scans and applying full color and closed surfaces, then we've reduced the time from 2 hours 30 minutes to 1 hour and 40 minutes in order to create that full project point cloud. The license transfer option has been added to your license manager, so you'll see now an option for transferring a license. Clicking on that button will then bring up the license transfer window, where you select the recipient information and send them the license or the alternative machine. And then you simply go to that machine and click on the transfer license option and update the key onto that machine. And therefore you can move licenses around simply without having to contact support to release a new license for you. A few other additional settings. In the new interface, we've added the option now for small sizes. We can also choose what we're going to do when we click on the Explore tab, whether you want it to automatically open the 3D view or not. That's quite good if you're working on a large project because it could take time. We can also now decide what dimensions we want shown. It used to be when we placed a dimension, you get all three. Then we changed it to overall, but now it's user defined, so you can choose what dimension appears as you place a dimension. We can also choose what we do with regards to how the data is loaded, whether it's in color mode or intensity mode. We've got a new export category for units where we specify the default unit length for export of data, And in addition to this, when you're selecting spheres, you typically put in the standard spheres that you use, but if you inadvertently click a random sphere and it's something that it's a non-standard size, then the system will remember that and give you a secondary list. So that covers most of the features. Now what we'll do is we'll drop into the interface and have a look at a few of them. So now we're in the software. The first thing you'll notice, we have the new unified toolbar along the bottom where we can turn off adaptive spacing, we can change the point spacing, we can go into clear view mode, we can do gap filling, subsampling, toggle clipping boxes, forward and back on your camera position, set your center rotation, set your predefined views, fit the view, also switch the camera mode to orthographic or perspective, and we can change the rotation method. So a couple of things to highlight here. First off, we have the show grid tool in the new interface. So if I just click on that to show the grid, you can see that's down there now on the floor. I can also, if I go to the grid tool, I can attach to a scan point with one click or attach with 3 clicks. So if I wanted to put it on the face of this arch here, just click on there and then I've got my grid points on there. If I want to modify that grid, then what we can do is go in and go to the grid properties and change that to a polar grid, click apply, and then we've got a polar grid there. Or we can simply toggle the grid off. We then also have the new overview map functionality. You can see the icon up here. If I click on it, we can create, update, open or delete. So if I open that particular overview map that I've already created, what it's done is it's created almost like an X-ray overview map of the location of the scans. If I click on any of the scan locations, I can either go to the 3D view or I can go to the quick view of that scan. So if I go to the quick view of that particular scan, what it will do is it will load in the data, and then as soon as it's loaded in, if I rotate around, then we'll have that predefined view in the system already. Again, just to highlight, we now have the new color mode option on the ribbon toolbar. So if I click on color mode, it will then toggle back to a grayscale environment. So there you see, we're now in grayscale. So it makes it a lot easier with selecting targets and things because you're working on intensity values rather than having the degradation of light in your scans. Again, if I want to toggle back, I simply just click on the icon. So now we're back in color mode. So I just close that view down now. So now if I wanted to just look at an overview map for a single scan, if I right click on it, go to view and go to overview map, then it'll open up the overview map for that one scan to see the exact extremities of what that scan's captured. Or we'll just close that down again. If you don't want to use it, you just right click and go delete. If we now wanted to export that overview map, if we go to the export tab, click on the export overview map option, we can now export as a TIFF or a DXF into whatever system we need to. But using the overview map now is a great way to look at where your scan positions are and how you've captured that data. So if I just close that down and go back to our 3D view, what we'll do now is we'll go in and we'll select a small area. So if I go back to my Explore tab, and we'll select a polygon area just around this area here. Now we've selected that, if we then go to our mesh selection tool and go mesh selection, this now brings up the dialog box where we can decide, as we said before, how we want to fill the holes and create the edges. So we'll leave that roughly in the middle, and then we can choose what percentage we want to smooth by turning that option on and using the slider bar, and we can also decide how many triangles we want to create. When we're happy with the settings we've got here, we literally just click create and let it create the mesh for us. So now that mesh is created, down here in our tree on the left, and if we just click on it, go to 3D view, and there we have our completed mesh. So, looking at some of the other features, if I now go to a predefined clipping box and activate it, I've also got the mesh active as well. So if I just go to my visibility settings, go to my layer, go to the bottom and turn off my meshes. And then what I can do, if I go to my apps, and then I can use my orthophoto app here, and you can see down at the bottom, not only can we pick a projection plane, so if I wanted to project onto that plane there, then I pick that as my projection plane. I can also turn on my DXF export. So if I click show preview, it will give me a quick preview of what our orthophoto is likely to look like. So there you can see we've got our orthophoto based on that, and it's given us our projected plane. So if I click create, we can now create that as a TIFF, a PNG, a JPEG or a BMP. So just while we're in the apps, we've now included the forensic wizard as well. So if you really needed to, you can calculate blood splatter origin and also calculate the shot origin, which is more a specific need for the forensic side of the use of FARO scene. Whilst we're in here as well, if we go to settings and we go to license manager, in the license manager you'll notice we now have a transfer license option. So once you've clicked on that button, it will open up a PDF document and tell you exactly what you need to do. So in here, if we go to the license transfer tool, we need to put information in for the recipient, and we also need to set up which key we want to transfer, and then that allows us to transfer the license from this machine to another machine of our choice. So we'll just close that down. In here, a couple of last little settings. As I've said, if you want to choose what you do when you click on the Explore tab, we can choose to automatically open the 3D. We can also choose what measurement properties to show as we place dimensions within the point cloud. So that pretty much covers all the new features within Scene 7. So just to recap, there is the new on-site registration, which we'll cover in a separate tutorial, along with WebShare Cloud. We've made improvements to the meshing functionality, also giving you the ability to create your own overview maps and export them. We can now toggle between color and grey in Quick View or in Planar View, or select poly edges, or create targets and planes and markers, whilst applying the grid tool and updating the navigation toolbar. We've made modifications to the apps for orthophoto and included the forensic wizard. We've given you the ability to transfer the license. We've done improvements to the edge artifact and the project point cloud filters, and we've also made some amendments to the settings. Thank you for watching. I hope it's been of use, and please feel free to watch out for forthcoming tutorials.